Commissioner McNinch, would you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Suzanne, could you please call the roll? Here. Commissioner Barnes is absent. He has a family wedding on his ranch, I believe, tomorrow. I believe he's absent as well as he is out of town.
Here.
Would the county advisory boards please stand and announce themselves? Thank you. Now we're going to move on to the Warden of the Year and Shikar Safari Game Warden of the Year, Chief Game Warden Tyler Turnipseed. Tyler?
As you said, this agenda item is for our annual Game Warden of the Year award, and this is sort of a two-pronged thing. Our Nevada Game Wardens Association selects a Game Warden of the Year from their ranks, totally selected by their peers, and then what goes hand in hand with that is this award, the Shikar Safari Award, sponsored through Safari Club International, and a pretty prestigious thing that they award in a state each year. And this year I'm proud to say that this award goes to our local Lincoln County Game Warden, John Anderson. While I've got John on his feet, I'll just say a couple things. A couple things that I'm really proud of John for is that he's totally immersed himself in this community. His family's here. He loves Lincoln County. Lincoln County loves him. We were just in a meeting this morning in which the mayor and some city councilmen and the new district attorney all spoke to what a good job John is doing here and what a great rapport he has with the community. And I really appreciate that. I encourage all of our young game wardens in small towns to be a member of the community, not just as a game warden, but as a person in that community. So John has done an outstanding job of that. He knows everybody in town, everybody knows him, and he's active in all sorts of facets of the community. A couple of John's cases you guys have heard me report on here in the last few years. One that comes to mind, a pretty landmark case we had in which had an elk poached, and I'm sure you guys remember the press releases. There happened to be a photo captured of some people going in front of a trail camera on the night that the elk was poached. Long story that John could tell you sometime, but he ended up locating a carcass of the elk, or the rancher did, and he got the dubious job that game wardens do of digging through a pile of maggots in the middle of a hot month, trying to find a bullet, looking for evidence. This elk had been killed on private land without permission. The head was cut off. The meat was wasted. We had a lengthy investigation. John was very tenacious, stayed on it. Took almost a year to put the case together, and ended up identifying the suspect, building enough evidence to prosecute, and ended up with one of our best sentences that we've ever had. It was a Zachary Holdaway case. Got an excellent conviction and a $20,000 civil penalty out of it. It's the biggest civil penalty I ever remember in a wildlife case, and that civil penalty money comes back to the department into the Operation Game Thief program. So excellent case that John showed a lot of tenacity in, and a talented investigator, and he's doing a great job here. So thanks, John.
And before we move on, John, I just want to say on behalf of the Nevada Board of Wildlife Commissioners and all Nevadans that we really appreciate all that you do for our wildlife in the state, and we know it's a tremendously difficult job that you all have, but we do recognize the outstanding job and work that you do for us all, and congratulations on a well-deserved honor.
Mr. Chairman.
Director Wasley.
If I might add, I'd like to congratulate this year's recipient and also thank his family. Clearly, his wife has her hands full while he's working for the state, but John is, if we were able to clone him and put him in every small community around the state, we would, but we're immensely grateful for what he does, the way he immerses himself in his community, the cases that he makes, and the support of his family. So I want to congratulate him on the record as well and thank him personally.
Seeing no further comments, we'll move on to agenda item number 2, election of officers. In accordance with Commission Policy Number 1, the Commission will elect a chairman and vice chairman. Just for reference, the policy states that on the first meeting after July 1st, the chairman and vice chairman will be elected, and it doesn't apply, but a commissioner cannot serve more than 2 consecutive terms as chair. With that, I would open up nominations for chairman.
It would be my honor to nominate Vice Chairman Brad Johnston to be the next chairman of the Nevada Board of Wildlife Commissioners.
I'll second that.
While I accept the nomination, any other nominations? I believe this is an action item, so we'll take it out to public comment on the nomination in second. Or is there any other nominations? Seeing none, public comment on the nomination. Seeing none, come back for the vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. I'll abstain from that vote, so it passes 5-0 with Commissioners Barnes and Cavilla absent. Thank you all for that nomination and vote of confidence. I will do the best that I can to fill some very big shoes that have been left by prior chairmen of this commission. Next, we need to nominate those for vice chair, and if I may, I'd like to nominate Paul Valentine to serve as vice chairman of the Nevada Board of Wildlife Commissioners.
I'll second that.
Commissioner Valentine, if you accept that nomination. Any other nominations for vice chair? This is an action item. I'll take it out to public comment. Seeing none, I'll bring it back. All those in favor of Commissioner Valentine serving as vice chair, say aye. Aye. Opposed? That motion carries unanimously with Commissioners Barnes and Cavilla absent. That closes agenda item number 2. We'll move on to agenda item number 3, approval of the agenda. The Commission will review the agenda and may take action to approve the agenda. The Commission may remove items from the agenda, continue items for consideration, or take items out of order. Any comments on the agenda? And one thing we do need to make sure is keep your cell phones away from the microphones, because when they pick up data or emails, they interfere with the. Seeing no comments, this is an action item. Any public comment on the agenda? Seeing none, I'll bring it back and we'll entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I'll move to approve the agenda as presented.
I have a motion to approve the agenda as presented by Commissioner McNinch with a second by Commissioner Hubbs. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? None. Motion passes 6-0 with Commissioners Barnes and Kavuya absent. That closes agenda item number 3. We'll move on to agenda item number 4. Member items, announcements, and correspondence. Commissioners may present emergent items. No action may be taken by the commission. Any item requiring commission action may be scheduled on a future commission agenda. The commission will review and may discuss correspondence sent or received by the commission since the last regular meeting and may provide copies for the exhibit file. Commissioners may provide hard copies of their correspondence for the written record. Correspondence sent or received by Secretary Wosley may also be discussed. Any member items or correspondence? I think the only one that I saw, I believe there was an email that went to the department regarding the trail cam regulation, and it was not really in favor or against the trail camera regulation, but a request that some additional efforts be made to notify the public of that regulation. And I believe after I saw that email correspondence, I get the email announcements from the department, and I saw an email blast that came out from the department talking about the trail camera regulation. The only other correspondence I received related to an agenda item, so I'll save that. And I did have one comment from an individual about the commission meeting being in this location. And I understand it can be inconvenient to go to various parts of the state, as big as it is. But when I responded to the individual and said, you know, I'm really happy to be going to Lincoln County in particular because one of the agenda items is the landowner deer tag program, and I wanted to be in that location to hear from individuals in that part of the state because it's a big issue there particularly. It was kind of like, well, point well taken. And I tried to assure the individual we don't move the meetings around the state to create inconvenience for anyone but because there's a value to it. And I certainly enjoy coming down to different parts of the state and appreciate to be here and the hospitality everyone in Lincoln County has shown us and will continue to show us. Anything, Director Wosley?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You're correct. We did receive an email encouraging the department to take on an outreach effort, education effort relative to the new trail cam regs. We corresponded with that individual and let them know of what our plans were, and then shortly after we received that email, we completed the email blast that went out to all the account holders in our system. I would also share that after that email blast went out, within the first 15 minutes, I received 3 extremely complimentary emails of the department and commission's actions relative to that trail cam regulation. All 3 of those emails expressed a great deal of appreciation and gratitude for the commission's actions relative to that trail cam regulation. Just a couple other emails that weren't forwarded to the commission just because of their general nature. One pertained to commercial advertisement that we have relative to life jackets and wearing life jackets. That particular ad has people falling from the sky, landing in the water. The individual expressed concern, characterized that spot as mortifying, especially in the light of the recent tragedy in Missouri. However, that same commercial spot just received first place from the Association of Conservation Information conference in Missouri. So it's mortifying by design. We could prevent a lot of those drownings and relayed that to the individual. We also had an email of complaint from a kayak owner at Lake Tahoe that got cited for not having an AIS sticker. It was cited for a fine of, I think, in excess of $100, and expressed concern over the lack of outreach by the department. We have had significant outreach, but we'll try to step that up, particularly in that region. We have a lot of watercraft that require the AIS stickers, but they're not going in and out of ramps because they're tied to specific residences along the lake and aren't exposed to some of our outreach efforts. So we'll certainly step up some of those outreach efforts. But I think all the other correspondence that was received, we're still receiving some correspondence relative to the shed antler reg, particularly out of White Pine County. But I believe the commission has been copied on all that correspondence as well. And that concludes any correspondence we receive.
Thank you. Anything else from the commission on that item? Go ahead and move on to agenda item number 5, county advisory boards to manage wildlife. Member items. CAB members may present emergent items. No action may be taken by the commission. Any item requiring commission action will be scheduled on a future commission agenda.
For the record, Gene Green, Carson City Cab. We had a little discussion the other night at our meeting, and we just wanted to commend Sean Espinoza for the hard work he's done over the years. It's made quite a bit of difference with some of the people in Carson City, and we wanted to let him know how much we appreciated it. That was it. It was, we talked for quite some time about the little things he's been doing over the years, and it's made a big difference to some of the people in Carson. And we recommend that he understand that. Thank you. And on a personal note, I like moving around the state. To me, I'm going to avoid Vegas. Thank you.
Craig Burnside, Douglas. Just wanted to let you guys know we have on our agenda, if you've looked at our agenda, every month or every meeting, the Tri-County Wildlife Working Group, which consists of Douglas, Carson, and Washoe. We're all along the Sierra front. We haven't had a meeting in quite a while, but with the efforts of one of the members on our board, Bob Rittenhouse, there is a meeting scheduled August 30th, where no more than 2 members of each of those CABs will attend the meeting, and we'll discuss issues that are similar or common to all of us along the Sierra front, and we're hoping to keep that going as a regular item. Just wanted to make you aware we were going to be doing that, and we will probably solicit assistance from staff to come and make presentations at those meetings when we do have them. So just wanted to make you aware we were going to be doing that.
Mr. Chairman, can I ask a quick question? Can you let me know when that meeting is, what time and where, so I can try and attend? Thank you.
John Hyatt, Clark County Cab. A question came up at our meeting with regard to, is the department seeing or anticipating an influx of bears into Nevada as a result of drought and fires in California? So I'll just pass on that question. Thank you.
Steve Marcus, Lifeline County. We, as I spoke in Dyer, we were going to propose a Nevada Youth Tech Transfer Program. We sat and had a good meeting about it, and we come up with what we thought would be a good idea, and I forwarded hard copies to everybody. I think an email was sent to you all yesterday. So what we were hoping to do is possibly get on an agenda and see if we could bring this forward as a regulation.
I believe this is one of the issues that the Tag Allocation and Application Hunt Committee has been looking at. And I'll try to, there's not been much going on with that committee because we were letting the new system roll out before we took up staff time with the committee meeting on the TAC committee. So I think it would go through that committee. It's on their list. And I think one of the hurdles may be is that to transfer tags may require an actual statutory change. But that's one of the things that's going to go through the committee and see where it comes. So I know it is on the radar. I know you guys have pushed it forward, and hopefully the TAC committee will ramp up now again.
Okay.
And bring it through that.
Can you tell me when they're meeting?
As the chairman of that committee, maybe not much longer chairman of that committee, but it will. I anticipate having a TAC committee meeting in connection with the September commission meeting, which is going to be Las Vegas.
Okay, if we could find out, we could possibly have someone in attendance to
Sure, absolutely.
work with you?
Yes,
Okay, thank you.
thank you.
For the record, Corey Lytle, Lincoln Cab. Hey, just real quick, I want to extend our local appreciation to John as well. And Millie's not here anymore. We can't embarrass her. We certainly appreciate them. They're members of the community, just like Tyler had stated, just like Tony had stated. They're involved in youth sports, community events. I mean, wherever you go, you see them as part of the community, and we really appreciate that. Some housekeeping stuff. Dane went and got the table. We will be providing lunch. There'll be sandwich, deli-style salads and stuff show up, and it'll just be $10 if anybody's interested. So just kind of we'll be doing that as soon as we get through the agenda today and whatever. So we'll make a plan when that happens.
Move on to agenda item number 6, Wildfire 2018 Report, Habitat Division Administrator Alan Janae, informational. A report on the Martin Fire and the 2018 wildfire season in Nevada will be provided. Mr. Janae.
One moment, Chairman. Thank you. Thank you, Chairman and Commissioners. Again, for the record, Alan Janae, Habitat Division Chief. Working through the technical difficulties here, but okay, as everybody in the room knows, this year is living up to the expectation. It was a wet spring. Despite the drier winter, it did turn into a wet spring, and vegetative growth conditions were pretty good, and so we were expecting a pretty good fire year, and it's getting there. This picture here is a picture of the largest fire in the state's history, the Martin Fire. This is an aerial view here. I'll kind of go over pieces of that as we go through this presentation. Here are the list of the fires that have burned this year. Total 141 fires. Those that are greater than 5 acres are actually 150, or less than, it says, it's greater than 5 acres is 115. Those that are greater than 1,000 acres are 24. 10,000 acres or greater is 5, and 2 fires greater than 100,000. And when you look across, there's 2 that are highlighted in red, which are making up the majority of that, with the Martin Fire being at 435,000 acres, and the Goose Creek, that one still isn't finalized. These are rough estimates from Nevada Division of Forestry that were supplied on Tuesday of this week. So despite having a grand total of almost 700,000, when you look at 2 fires that wrap up the neighborhood of 550,000 of that, it's pretty noteworthy that the containment forces and the firefighters are doing a really good job. There were actually, when I looked at this, when it looks at that 141 that are less than, or greater than 0, and then you look down and there's a pretty good number in there that were put out before they got to 5 acres. And this is only accounting for those that really, you know, burn some significant portion. When I talked to Paul Peterson, the BLM state fire lead, there are many others that are lightning strikes that are actually put out that aren't captured by NDF. So when you look at this, is that it only takes, the Martin fire is a great example of that, only takes one fire to get away, and it can eat up a whole lot given the wrong conditions. And that Martin fire was one of those where it was moving at, I think it was 14 miles an hour. They had equipment and dozers on site, but dozers couldn't keep up with the fire. So really added to the issues. Looking around the state, this is a capture, GIS capture of the fires that have occurred in southern regions. So southern region has kind of missed the force so far. The fires haven't hit as bad down here yet. Again, it is only August, so there's the clear reality that it can and will possibly happen, monsoonal and possible lightning strikes down here. This is a picture here of the western region of the state. You can see that Martin fire. It burned across both the eastern and western regions. The other one that was up near Pyramid Lake, which was a intentional start, the Prairie Fire, that one I think is approximately 50,000 acres. And then you can see across that I-80 corridor there's many small starts. Again, there's a fair percentage of ignitions that are human caused, trailer chains, dragging, cigarettes kicked out, crazy things like that. Here's the eastern region, zoomed in on that, showing the Martin fire. Again, that was human caused there, 435,000 acres. And then that Goose Creek, I believe that on the Utah-Nevada line, that I believe was a lightning strike. When you look at where we are comparatively 1996 to 2016, just in August, early August of 18, 700,000 acres. Last year we finished 2017 at 1.3 million acres. So we're on pace. They do, for what it's worth, and hopefully nobody in here is a climatologist, but they are predicting a wet into the summer, the long-term prediction, but it's a weather forecast, so take it for what it's worth. But it is pretty significant when you look at where we rank within this fire history, and you think that that's basically 3 fires that almost got us there. One that's the most significant portion of that. Thinking about fire impacts on greater sage-grouse, statewide, 486,000 total acres burned, and much of that was in just a couple of fires. That Perry fire that's up by Reno, that burning some of the last remaining sage-grouse habitat in that country. Martin Creek fire, I'll point to here in just a second, burned a significant piece, and then that Goose Creek fire up in eastern Nevada is burning a good swath of that. You can look and see that the majority of this is on BLM lands. So here's the focus to the Martin fire. You can see that sage-grouse values, PHMA 153,000 acres, GHMA 9,000. There's an additional 30,000 of OHMA. When you look at this area, there were 29 active LECs that were burned over, 10 pending, 7 inactive, and 1 historic. Sean Espinoza did some calculations for me. Basically, this affected approximately 756 male birds that attend these LECs. Some of these LECs are 75 to 90 bird LECs. And so when you do the calculation on the conversion of males and the percentage to females, it comes up with a total of approximately 2,500 birds total impacted by this Martin Creek fire. When you think about this, this is approximately 4% of the state's population of sage-grouse. So this was a very key piece to sage grouse, this martin fire. Much of that Hawaii Desert, I don't know if you've ever been up there, but it's very intact on the north end. Very sagebrush dominated. Some of it has very good understory underneath it, and the birds were definitely using it. But you think about 4% of the population being affected, and it'll probably be some form of effect for especially 3 to 5 years while the recovery occurs. Sean says that 4% is actually more than we harvest statewide per year. So that's basically the Debbie Downer situation of what we've seen, and we're still in the middle of fire season, but we are working with BLM and all the other private landowners and land management agencies to try to do rehab, meaningful rehab. The Martin Fire has been a really good opportunity. It's brought a lot of people together to the table, trying to design the best treatments possible. The saying that I've been using is it's the biggest fire in history. We're going to try to make it the biggest restoration effort in the history of Nevada. So that's where we stand. And if you have any questions, Chairman, I'd stand for that. The best explanation I have heard is somebody said they were actually lighting golf balls on fire. They dipped them in gasoline and were swatting golf balls that were lit after being drenched in gasoline. It was the 4th of July when this fire took off. It was 4th of July Eve when that fire started. And so that's what I've heard the explanation. Initially it was thought to be fireworks, and then this latest. Yeah, it's tough to really say what the percentage of lost within a fire is, because it's very conditional to the time of day. It's conditional to the environment that's burning. We don't have a great estimate. We do know that there is a direct mortality portion. Firefighters who are on the line will often talk about streamers, and it's chukar and sage grouse that at night are flying. The fire's coming towards them, and they basically fly through the fire and catch, and then they'll go as streamers out the backside, and so they end up, the firefighters always complain about it because it's igniting new areas that is unburned because of these streamers. But we see it as far as mule deer, antelope, most every fire we can go and we can find when it is those types of speeds where animals can outrun and they're consumed by the fire. But we don't have a great estimate as to what that direct mortality is. But we do know that the indirect mortality of this, the loss of habitat, that these birds, there's certain burrowing rodents and birds that occupy these habitats, and after the fire, they come out of their den or out of their hole, and if they survive the fire, what's left for them is nothing. It's just black. So.
It's a recurring report.
Yeah. Let's play for a correct weather forecast. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll move ahead to the next agenda item, and that's agenda item 7A, Commission General Regulation 477, Landowner Deer and Antelope Compensation Tag Program, LCB file number 096-18. Game Division Administrator Brian Wakeling. This is a possible Action item. The commission will hold a second workshop to consider a regulation relating to amending Chapter 502 of the Nevada Administrative Code. The regulation would provide direction for allocating landowner deer and antelope compensation tags should the statutory limit be reached. The commission considered this regulation during a workshop at their meeting on June 29, 2018. The commission directed the department to provide specific language to improve the clarity of the proposed regulation. Mr. Wakeling.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. Thank you. Before I initiate the formal presentation, just wanted to remind everybody where we are with this particular, our objective with this particular proposed regulation change. It was approaching a little over a year and a half ago now. We were in the process of trying to award tags based on the existing program, and at that point, we were, for the first time, we had actually were in a situation where we had more owner applicants in the landowner compensation tag program for deer and antelope that qualified for tags than what we had available based on the number of tags that were approved by the commission through the quota system. And it's based on a statutory cap at that point in time of 1.5%. We were able to get a statutory change. We had an open bill, our license simplification bill that was open, that essentially came very close to doubling the amount of tags that were available to owner applicants in the landowner compensation tag program. It went from 1.5% to 2.5%. So it wasn't quite double, but it was almost. It was a large ceiling that was built in there. Subsequent to that, we've talked with the commission on a number of times, and we actually took this idea out to the landowners, and we held 3 public meetings. We invited our stakeholders, both on the landowner side and on the sportsman side, and anybody that was interested to participate in this. We've been focused on one aspect of this program, and overall, the landowners have expressed satisfaction with the existing program. The sportsmen have also supported it. The one factor that we don't have within the existing program is in the event that we exceed that cap again at some point in the future, we have no way that currently exists to distribute, equitably distribute tags at that point in time. And so what we've been focused on in this effort is trying to deal with that one issue of establishing a method by which to equitably distribute tags. And that's that was a direction the commission provided to the department and what we've been focused on through here. So, as I mentioned, the landowners, the owner applicants that are part of this program, each year when they contact the agency, let us know that we happen to have a situation, and we go out and we help conduct a count. They have the option to waive us off of that for whatever reason, something odd happens that particular day, deer don't show up, whatever. They have a chance to have a recount or a different count at a different day. But the cap is based on the total number of deer and antelope tags approved by the commission at the quota set meeting. So when we sum all those tags together, and routinely it's in excess of 20,000 tags. And just for easy math, I like to use 20,000 as that number, and 1.5% of 20,000 was about 300 tags. With the exchange in the legislation, with the license simplification, it jumps to 2.5%. So it went from 300 tags as a statutory limit to 500 tags with that 20,000. Now, as I mentioned, routinely it's in excess of that number, and so this last year, if memory serves, it was closer to 550 tags that had were available to be awarded through the landowner compensation tag program. And so that then becomes the statutory limit, and it varies based upon the quota. We crafted language, we provided it to LCB. The Legislative Counsel Bureau then tries to put it in a format that we can use, and then it comes back, and that's what we workshop and with the commission. We had this conversation with the commission in June. At that time, the direction that the commission asked us to include within this document would be that we wanted to clarify that longevity applies, and the language, and I'll go through my example again here in just a moment, but I want to use the same example each time so that, you know, we continue to kind of use the same thought process, and so I'm trying to keep from confusing people any more than is necessary. But the two factors that we wanted to look at this point in time was the proportional award of tags. So if we exceed the cap, those tags are awarded proportionally. And the commission wanted to stipulate specifically that it was a proportional award. If there are additional tags that landowner applicants qualify for but have not, remain on the table after we proportionally award, then they would be awarded based on the longevity of their participation in the program. Not the number of consecutive years in which they've been awarded tags, but the fact that they've been in the program for the longest period of time. There may be years that they've been part of the program, they did not receive tags that year, but they're still been in the program for that length of time. We also wanted to the extent possible, improve clarity of the language. I noticed one of our county advisory boards had a little bit of trouble following the editorial approach that we use, but essentially when we make these edits, we have to make the edits with pen and ink and explain to the Legislative Counsel Bureau how that occurs. And so what we're providing to the commission for review is exactly what we'll be providing to the Legislative Counsel Bureau. And so we wanted to make sure we were consistent in that approach as well. So this is the example that I have been using, and again, just using a hypothetical situation. This is not a real situation, but for any given year, perhaps the 2.5% limit on statutory limit turns out to be 200 tags. That's the number of tags that we can award. As I mentioned, routinely this has been over 300. Currently, it's over 500. This is just an example. So in this hypothetical example, we have 50 owner applicants that qualify for a single tag, 30 that qualify for 2, 10 for 3, 5 for 4, 4 for 5, and so on through 8. And when you sum the total number of tags that would be awarded, that are qualified for, there's 222 tags that are qualified for in this example. However, our statutory limit is 200. So in this case, if we were to award the tags based on a proportional approach, and with this proportional approach, we would use standard rounding conventions, where if someone by proportionally, in the proportional award calculation, if they qualified for 1.5, 0.5 and above rounds up, 0.4 and below rounds down. So in this example, the people, the owner applicants that qualified for 1 and 2 tags would still receive 1 and 2 tags. Because this is a proportional award, the people that qualify for the least number of tags will always be protected the most. The 10 who would have received 3 would now receive 2. The 5 who would have received 4 would now receive 3. 4 would receive 5. 6 would receive 5, 7 would receive 6, and 8, the 2 landowner applicants that qualified for 8 would receive 6. This is in this instance, would be an 80% reduction in what the original qualification is, but yet we're still awarding them proportionally, and there are 5 tags remaining that could be awarded. And so, again, in this example, if we were to do so, and we looked at the owner applicants with the longest continuous application or continuous cooperation, the longest participation in the program, and again, hypothetically, we might have one of the 2 tag awards, one of the 3, one of the 4, one of the 5, and one of the 6. And so those 5 would receive, and ultimately that would award the remaining 5, which would bring us to the statutory limit in this example of 200. The language has been amended based on our conversations at the commission meeting in June, and that language is part of the support material with the edits included, and I'm willing to answer any questions the commission may have at this point.
I just had a couple comments, not so much questions, on the changes. On section 3, I see that we struck out owner applicant, but on the very end of that paragraph, we change it back to owner applicant. And I didn't know if an applicant could be anyone outside of an owner of the property, and if that was if the other owner needed to be strucken out too at the bottom of the paragraph.
That's, Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Hubbs, it's an excellent question. Part of the NAC that is not in this particular section, but 502-424 defines owner applicant, and in this case it says owner applicant is the owner of private land as identified in the deed of private land which is recorded with the county recorder of the county in which the property is located, who claims that his or her private land was damaged by deer or antelope, or a person who has obtained written authorization from the owner described in paragraph A to represent the owner regarding matters concerning damage compensation tags before the department, including without limitation a lessee or manager of the private land. So by that definition, it can be more broad. It can be not only the deed, the person recorded on the deed, but it could also be anybody that owner designates.
So what was the purpose of striking out owner on the fourth to bottom line? Or do you have that stricken out as well? I don't know if it was just maybe my copy, but I don't know if that was an error.
Perhaps I'm not following you. Where are we striking owner?
I have it on the fourth sentence, or the fourth from the bottom. It picks up of not more than one damage compensation tag to each, and then owner is stricken out, applicant having the longest continuous history of entering into cooperative agreements. As I was reading down, the very last line says owner applicant, as if it was okay to leave the word owner there, but not up above, and it was a little bit confusing.
Mr. Wakeling, it's on page 2, paragraph 3.
Page 2.
And then I think on paragraph 4, I think it's supposed to read, the department shall then determine the longest continuous history. Just a few typos, I think. The department shall then determine, and then insert the longest continuous history.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Hubbs, excuse me. In response to your first question on the owner applicant, that's a very good question. I'm not at all sure why we've got a strikeout on that. I don't think that was the commission's intent, and it may have been our error in our efforts to edit that. One other thing I should also mention is in Section 4, where it starts the department shall, it says the determine. We mentioned that the last time we failed to capture it. It should say shall determine the longest. So we've got two words transposed there as well.
I don't really have any other comments. It's kind of confusing, paragraph 3 still. It's not very clear, but I don't really know how to make it any more clear than it already is, to be honest. I get the intent and why we're doing it now and the methodology behind it. It's just not an easy one to read through. That's the only thing. But for the most part, I think we have what we discussed, the points, the last workshop.
Thank you, Mr. Wakeling. I'll go ahead and open up this agenda item for public comment. Mr. Hyatt.
John Hyatt, Clark County Cab. We were also concerned about the language with owner applicant, and even after seeing the presentation, still a little bit confused because it referred to properties on the slide. So is it properties, or is it the name on the deed, or who is it? And especially when it comes to giving out tags that are left over, if you will, for the proportional stuff. Properties change names sometimes as they transition from one generation to the next, as it goes from a simple owner to a trust, a family trust. So when it comes to determining who has the longest period of time with an agreement, how is that determined? It's not clear from what I see here as to how that would be determined. And when I looked at your example there, and you talked about an 80% reduction of something, I have no idea what that 80% was. That was absolutely not clear to me. I mean, I figured out a way to do this. It's an iterative process, really, to come up with how you do it, I think. So that's not very clear at all. In point number 6 in that section, it says unit or units within a management area for which the department issues. So does this only apply to properties when the units are the word? Does that only apply to properties that lie across 2 units? In other words, the boundary of the unit goes right to the property, or how is that determined? Why does it say unit or units? And we just felt the language in number 3 was pretty obtuse, and we would like to see language in statutes and regulations that the average person can understand. Thank you.
For the record, Corey Lytle, Lincoln Cab. Multiple times our cab has voted in opposition, basically, to this language. And we certainly don't want to discard the work that Chief Wakeling's done, the work the commission's done up to this point, staff, and everybody else. The issues we see are much deeper in this program than just simply addressing what happens when we hit the 2.5% cap or the 1.5% cap. And our recommendation at our last meeting was kind of take a step back, take a step back, and whether we bring it through a committee process or we need to get some more of the stakeholders involved. We realized that there was some outreach done a year and a half ago. Some of that outreach didn't reach it just didn't reach everybody. We know how these processes work. We know that staff tries to get out there and get the message out. And part of the problem is temporarily the issue was fixed. So there's a lot of landowners that just said, well, we're good for right now. We don't have to worry about it. The problem is we're going to hit that 2.5% cap. It's going to come. It's not a question of if, but a question of when. You have certain, dynamics that are occurring, especially down in this area. There's 8 million wild horses that are forcing some of these animals onto private property, and these problems and these issues compound year in and year out. And so we think the cap's going to get hit. It's just a matter of time. There's a good time right now where we have, a year or two, maybe 3, to step back, get the stakeholders involved, get the landowners involved, get the sportsmen involved, and look at the program comprehensively. And we certainly don't want to discard the work that's been done. This is a good option for if that cap gets hit. The problem we see is there's other aspects of the program that need to be addressed. We certainly respect the amount of work that NDOW has to do in managing the program, performing the things that they have to do as part of their part of the program. We understand the dynamics and the sensitivity of trying to get NRS changes. The original intent of the law was to keep it simple. We would like to keep it as simple as we can. The problem is there are several things, and we've sent these in on our comments about the last 3 or 4 meetings. There's a lot of things that need to be sat down in an open discussion with the stakeholders, say, hey, we need to go through these things, whether they can be addressed in NAC through regulation or whether they possibly have to go to legislature. We hope that they can be addressed just with regulation, with staff, and be able to be managed in a simplistic way. I can detail you guys on some specifics. We're going to see some of those issues today when we go on a tour this afternoon. We're going to talk about some of that stuff. I don't want to run down the list of things that we specifically sent in, but there's copies of it in the background information. We also realize that the state is very dynamic, very diverse. Issues that occur in, say, in Tom's area in Humboldt County are much different than down here or possibly in Elko County or White Pine County. It's a very complex, program. It's a very successful program, and it has been successful for, almost 3 decades now. The second thing I want to mention, and I don't want to be political, but there's 2 reps on this board that aren't here right now that are going to have to own this decision, ranching rep and a farm rep. And it makes it very complicated for them to be given something that maybe they necessarily ought to have a better hand in as we move forward on a vote. If they're stuck on the commission for 3 or 6 or however many years, I would certainly like to include them as part of the process. So that's my quick and dirty.
Good morning. I'm Dan Matthews. I represent Lincoln County Farm Bureau. I'm the county president, and I sit on the Nevada Board of Directors. I work at Flatnose Ranch here in Lincoln County. It's one of the largest participants in the program and one of the longest participants in the program. When I was a small child, I remember the frustrations that we had going out and seeing our haystacks destroyed and our crops taken, and the comfort that it was for our family when this program came about, and the stress that it relieved for our personal operation. My views reflect what a lot of what our county advisory board said. We'd like to table this issue for now, and let's continue to workshop it further and get more input, and let's get some more town halls going, because the board did a good job last year of putting a Band-Aid on this. They were put in a very difficult position, and they had to make hasty decisions, but they were cool, and they waited it out, and we have a good solution that's going to carry us for quite a while. And let's take this time now and continue to workshop it and make it better, because this program is really important, because it made the Department of Wildlife good partners in the care and stewardship of the wildlife, especially the mule deer population. And I have many suggestions on places to go once the 2.5% is met, but I don't think it's appropriate to say representing the people that I represent, because we still need more time to workshop it and come up with a better solution. Thank you.
Good morning, Commissioners. Emilia Cargill on behalf of Nevada Ranches and Blue Mountain Ranches of Nevada. And I sent a letter on August 7th. I believe I copied all of you. If any of you did not receive it and you see me, I have extra copies. And I will provide a copy of the same letter, so it's also a part of the written record today. As I've said before, thank you, first of all, thank you for all your time and effort on this. We believe it's very important. I agree with everyone that has spoken so far. And we still believe that there may be a better solution to doing this. I still am a proponent of banking any extra tags for some years to see how wildlife counts proceed. I understand that hasn't been picked up, but I mention it anyway. And then I have also provided written comments where I actually edited the statute. If you opened up my entire PDF, that was a part of it. I think that more clarity could be added, in particular to Section 3. Because it's an NAC and it's not an NRS, I believe that even in the comments to the NAC policy could be addressed, so that 10 years from now, when someone else is looking at this that hasn't been a part of this process, they can see what that policy was and what your thinking was as you proceeded. So that's a part of my suggestion. And I also would suggest that there is some sort of statement about how continuous ownership is addressed, and a statement about, as someone prior to me mentioned, change of ownership by family inheritance, by death, by divorce, by a family business breaking up. There's so many different things. By transfer of ownership from one entity to another for some internal reason that has nothing to do with change of actual property holding, other than a legal title changing. And so all of those comments are addressed, and if any of you would like a copy of my letter, I do have one. So thank you for your time.
Ms. Cargill, I don't think I received a copy of your letter. If I could, absolutely. Thank you. Further public comment? Seeing no further public comment, I'll bring the item back to the commission for discussion. Commissioner Valentine.
Thank you, Chairman Johnston. Mr. Lytle brings up an excellent point in the fact that we really don't have representation today from the farming and ranching side of the political aisle, I guess you could call it, and perhaps that's something we should have in attendance when we move this forward, if that is our intent.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So for me, I don't have a real heartache with continuing to work on stuff. A lot of good points. I appreciate those perspectives and those thoughts. In fairness to the department, there's been workshops on this. So I think if we're going to continue down that path and open that door again and provide those opportunities, I think it'd be really important to maybe Corey, maybe you could offer some suggestions on what's going to, Dan and Ms. Cargill, on what would help alleviate some of your concerns with those meetings and with those interactions, so the department, so accomplish what we're trying to accomplish, if we're going to continue, because a lot of effort goes into those meetings, and if we're going to go down that path, I think it's worthwhile, and I think it's appropriate, especially when people are engaging. But I think it'd be real helpful to let NDOW know exactly what it is that you're looking for, so that they can consider that as part of their process. So other than that, I do agree we've got something in place. It's important that we continue the conversation. I don't know how you clean up three. It's difficult. It's a tough right. So maybe, I don't know if you can put bullet points in here. Maybe that helps, so that I don't know.
Yeah, I just had a comment towards the banking idea there, and why it doesn't have any traction for me personally here is I think that as I look in banking, that we're basically acknowledging the fact that we're exceeding the cap and making it okay that we exceed the cap. And so I don't think I want to personally would like to go there. I don't like the banking idea for that reason. Is that to me it is truly we're approving the exceeding of the cap long before it gets approved. Then the second thing is that there are a lot of issues that can be addressed, but I don't have an opposition to addressing an issue at a time and getting over one. This is just one aspect of it. This is just addressing what we have to do with reaching the cap. And I think that there's other issues that we can address one at a time and make it less complicated and less, because these are huge issues, and we could dive into each one of the issues for quite some time. And I don't have any opposition to moving forward with any one of them, but I still would like to kind of address and clean up one at a time to where we've been. And I also don't have any problem waiting for representation for the farming and ranching when we can do that. I don't have a problem with that.
I just wanted to quickly add, I understand the concern about the farming and ranching, the representation missing today, but we need to also note on record at least that the last commission meeting, they were very much present and very much on board with the recommendations that were given to the department. So both parties were present at the table and seemed to want to move in the direction that was presented to us today.
I guess I would agree with a lot of what has been said already. I don't have a problem with waiting. I think it is very complicated. It kind of blew my mind, to be honest, to try and read through Section 3. And so I would really look for input, because I know, Mr. Wakeling, you've mentioned that you reached out and weren't getting a lot of input. So I really would encourage you, if we table this, to get some time to really work through these issues, because we can't keep tabling this. We're going to have to make a decision at some point. Thanks.
I think this has been before this commission for about a year, more than a year, because we started when we were running into the statutory cap and we got the legislative fix. And since that point in time, despite saying, well, we got the legislative fix, we don't need to do anything, we've tried to do something. And I think this is about the third or fourth meeting where we've talked about a proposed regulation or how to deal with if we run into the statutory cap. So it's a bit frustrating to get to this point and say, put it on hold, because we need more input when we've been asking for it, have received it, and a lot of what we said was keep it simple and keep it fair. And the way to keep it simple and keep it fair was to do a proportional award. The problem I have with the regulation as drafted is I still don't understand how it works. And maybe in my mind, I'm doing it differently, the calculations. But I don't know why you can't put in the actual mathematical process that you will go through into the regulation. And the way I view that as, you're going to have the statutory cap. And if you say you had 20,000 tags at the quota setting and the statutory cap's 2.5%, that creates the statutory cap of, let's say, 500. If you have applicants that qualify for a total of 600, then you take 500 and you divide it by 600, and you go, I can award 83% of the tags. I'm going to take that quotient, I'm going to multiply it against what you qualified for, and that's what's going to tell you what you get. If there's any left over, then we get into the next section. I agree with Commissioner Olmberg that I think banking the tags is just absolutely inconsistent with the statutory cap. That's just awarding the tags in future years. And I can't go along with that, and I've said that previously. So I don't mind putting this off, but if we put it off to get more input, I'm hoping we actually get more input. And I think there's a distinct difference between taking a comprehensive look at the landowner tag program and addressing what happens if we reach the statutory cap. To me, those are two totally different issues. And I understand that there is an appetite to look at the program in more detail. But my question is, where do you want to go if we hit the statutory cap? And that's really the first issue that we need to hear from. And then if we want to take a more comprehensive look, fine, but let's not lose sight of the fact that we want to address this specific issue in light of statute that exists that caps the number of landowner tags. So I would like to see a regulation consistent with what I believe Clark County's action report was, and Mr. Hyatt can correct me if I'm wrong. They wanted to see it detailed. How does this work with actual numbers or a mathematical formula? And I'd like to see that too in the regulation. It gives it clarity, explains it, you can plug the numbers in. And there are many statutes and regs and things like that that do that. And that's what I think I'd like to see. I see a lot of heads nodding. This is what some of the cabs want to see. And we'll bring it back. And I have no problem waiting until we have a new farm rep and when Mr. Barnes is here. But we've heard from the ag community quite a bit. And I think it's two things, keep it simple and keep it fair. Doing that and putting it into actual regulatory language makes it a little hard. And I appreciate all the work the department's done so far. So I don't know at this point if we want to give direction to the department to go back and try again on the regulation and bring it back for yet another meeting. But if we keep coming back on another meeting, I really don't, and I mean this with all due respect, I know people are busy. I don't want to hear again we need more time to provide more input because it's been a year.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
A couple of points that that may assist with this. First of all, I think we can come back with a mathematical formula to insert in here. However, because of the nature of somewhat of the iterative analysis, the example was, why was 80% there? When we did the 222 to 195, that constituted, in that example, was about an 80% reduction. It's not always an 80% reduction. And depending upon whether or not it was 222 or 232, or just the dynamics of how many tags, how many owner applicants qualified for more tags, that reduction may have changed. And so what I'm saying is that when we put this in a mathematical formula, it may not be a simple mathematical formula that most people can recognize. It may be, I don't think we're going to have calculus or derivatives based in the thing, but there may be some analyses or some of the formula that's not just going to be a simple plus minus divided by. It may be a complex formula. But I think we can put one in here for the Commission's consideration. A couple of other points. I know that the idea of banking tags has been discussed a great deal. Our analysis indicates that that's actually not a statutory option at this point in time. There's no mechanism by which to do that. And so that was something we took off the table pretty early in their conversations. And it's not that we're continuing to ignore people. Based on our analysis, it's just not an option for us to even entertain without entertaining additional statutory change. Finally, when you're looking at the longevity formula, currently ownership is defined as the owner applicant in that example that I provided, where it speaks to the owner of the private land is identified in the deed of the private land, which is recorded with the county recorder of the county in which the property is located, who claims that his or her private land was damaged. That's a very concrete, simple definition. We've been challenged in some of our ability to award not just compensation tags, but also incentive tags for the ELK program because of divorces or because of, it's really difficult, especially in the event of a non-amicable of divorce, sometimes to be able to trace who got what. The owner applicant history is defined really clearly as a deed. And so for simplicity's sake, on the part of the department, it's easier to track ownership longevity simply through something that already exists, rather than trying to come back and look at how things may have been sometimes handed down without reference, some other legal document that allows us to follow it. That's not a deal killer. That's just a consideration that I want the commission to be aware of as they continue to deliberate on this.
So, I guess I have a question, and I don't want to go too far into the weeds on this, but for example, if an individual owns a ranch and for purposes of tax purposes, liability purposes, whatever, they decide to take the ranch that's deeded in their name and put it in a limited liability company, the transfer of that land in the LLC shouldn't penalize them if they're a continuous participant on that property with this program, if it's the same ownership. But I'll have to go back and look at that issue. I get that the math formula might be complicated, but the ability of farmers to do math in their head always never ceases to amaze me. They're some of the most mathematically talented people I've ever met, and I'm quite confident that if we set it out in black and white, they're going to be able to follow how this is going to work. So, Commissioner Olmberg?
Yeah, I do agree with Brian. I think there's going to be a little bit of a trouble to describe this formula because it is an iterative process. It isn't a one-time formula of things. He has to change those percentages until he gets below that because of round-off errors. So it isn't something that is going to be a straightforward thing. It is, again, it's trial and error through here to fit in. So it's going to be hard to put a mathematical formula this is what we do every time, other than describe the process of it being iterative. You have to do this multiple times to get below that. So that'll be tough. And then another thing I'd kind of like to discuss a little bit, and I don't know where it could. One of the things that got mentioned is about having a full-time, and again, going towards more deeper issues with the program is affording someone that's through the Department of Biologists that is tracking all these different areas and participants in the program. And maybe if the landowners, if we reach out to them, if what their interest would be to supporting a position, because I think as we address these, they're so complicated because they're so different in different areas. I think you can't have a regional guy, speaking for all the regions. It would have to be somebody that would be dedicated to the landowner program that goes through there. And as we had, people testify before, is that it wasn't being evenly applied. The process wasn't in the past, but you have someone there that goes through all of the landowner people, and to see if the landowners would be interested in a processing fee that would support a full-time biologist that would have valuable input if we, going forward, looking 2-3 years down the road, that they have that experience in all these different areas and specifically addressing some of these other issues beyond the cap.
I just wanted to comment really quickly. Mr. Wakeling, in terms of the example, I'm thinking more or less like when we're young, we're learning a story, like a story problem example. This year, so many tags were awarded. This, this is the percentage overall. This is what our 2.5% brought us to. And then go through the motion in an example and post it there. Now, we know every year that may change, but that methodology will be at least something that individuals can fall back on and say, no, that's not what you did here, if something goes amiss moving forward.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I'm confident we're going to get to that. I know the department will come up with something that we're going to be able to work with and help clean that up. But I'm going to go back to the opportunity process again. I couldn't agree more with Chairman Johnson. At some point we got to move forward, and I'm going to say it again to the folks that commented. You've got to let NDOW know what you need. They've in my mind, from my perspective, the attempt's been made to reach out, and they got what they got. So it's going to be up to you guys to come to them and let them know what you want at this point, so that they can throw those considerations in and process them. I think that's really important, and I'm sure that they'll come up with something to provide those opportunities again. But it's an exhaustive process to begin with, and I remember the surveys, and I remember you went to Elko and Vegas, or Elko, and where did you go? I know you went to 3 or 4 places, but those efforts have been there, and it's a lot. It's big. It takes a lot of resources to do those things. So I just ask you guys to reach out to the department, let them know exactly what you're thinking. So.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. One other wild card in this particular language that we're able to end with is LCB. And LCB drafts that language, and LCB certainly needs to approve that language in a way that they feel is enforceable and consistent with the intent. So this is an LCB draft as indicated in the footer. So those handwritten marks in there from the department based on the commission's input to modify that LCB draft. But whatever language we come up with ultimately will have to be edited and approved by LCB. So this is not, we don't have the kind of latitude and flexibility and ownership and authorship of this that we'd like. So I just want to make sure the commission and others are aware that LCB will ultimately have to approve what we put forward based on your input.
Yes, just one more note. When we first went through the first read and we were talking about the owner applicant, and you stated that in another section there was a definition for owner applicant, was that for NAC or NRS? I was just trying to go back to, because I'm wondering if we perhaps modify, if it's in a NAC, propose modifications for owner applicant that include subsequent transfers or conveyances from the original owner applicant in some way, that we know that if there is a transfer, it's linked to the first owner application.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Hubbs, the first draft that we had of this, we didn't, it escapes me exactly the term that we used to describe I believe it was landowner cooperator or something of that nature. And in the first submission that we provided to LCB, we referred to them as the cooperator, and based on some of the input we'd received during that process, we had tried to include some information about longevity of the participation in the program, and tried to define that. LCB is the entity that used the term owner applicant based on their analysis and the earlier NAC with the definitions of what an owner applicant was. And so, as Director Wasley kind of pointed out, we had included some of that other information we'd heard. They changed the term, referenced the actual definition. And so any additional deviation from that definition, while it's not impossible, it certainly will take some additional justification on our part.
Any other comments? Mr. Wakeling, Director Wasley, do you need any more formal action by this commission, or are you clear?
Mr. Chairman, I think I understand where the commission wants to go at this point in time, and I think we can come back with a draft that largely reflects what we have now, except including a mathematical formula or a better description of the methodology, kind of with the iterative description on it, that we can come back for another workshop and see if that helps with the clarity and helps us move forward from that point.
And I just want to make a final comment that I don't, and I think I speak for all the commissioners on this. I mean, we want to get this right. I mean, we understand the program. We understand it's important. I understand there's some people who are frustrated with it. I understand some of the complexities of it, but it's an important program. And we've talked about this back to Douglas County, that with these type of landowner tags, you're buying tolerance from landowners for the ultimate benefit of wildlife. And so I want to make clear that, I'm supportive of this, but I just want to make sure we get it right. It's why we're willing to take a step back again and take another look at it. So hopefully we can get as much input as possible, because at some point in time we're going to have to do something. Thank you. You guys want to take a break? 10-minute break, or go to the next one? Well, okay. We'll go ahead and take a 10-minute break and reconvene at 10:35.